Okay, thank you everyone. I'm Lauren Tidbury and I work for both the Honor Frost Foundation and the Maritime Archaeology Trust. So I'm going to provide a bit of an update on the Listening to Our Past oral history project I've been working on over the last few years, and then also focus on a few of the key individuals who I've had the privilege to interview, who all help shape the field of maritime archaeology. And also I want to demonstrate how oral histories are helping to bring our past to life. So I'll just give a bit of a background to the project. I'll show you some of the processes that we've developed, where we're up to, and I'm also going to demonstrate our new project portal, which has just come out in the last few weeks, and then, like I said, talk about some of the key individuals. So just a bit of background. Since 2017, a team have been collecting interviews with people who knew and worked with Honor Frost. For those of you who don't know, she was a pioneering maritime archaeologist involved in early projects such as Cape Gelidonia, and she was active in the field from the 1950s until her death in 2010. So around 50 interviews have been undertaken, and the focus was on collecting testimonies, recollections, and experiences from Honour's friends and colleagues. But that project also began recording the history of maritime archaeology as they were discussing how they got into the field and their roles. So we soon realised that this was a really important repository of first-hand knowledge. I've got a little clip here of Honor Frost actually talking in an interview that she gave in 1993. So hopefully it's not going to blare out. Let's see.
Where did you learn the proper skills of archaeology? On land, I take it, because that's where people were sharpening their skills.
Well, I'm not a professional archaeologist, I'm not an archaeologist. I didn't learn in any formal way. But having, with my Middle Eastern childhood, I got an opportunity shortly after I learned to dive in France to do the drawing, the technical drawing for Dame Catherine Kennan, when she was on her last season of excavation at Jericho. And I was given the tombs which were away from the old time he was digging.
Which you enjoyed.
I enjoyed them thoroughly because they were read a sense of the problem was away. And then I learned how she wanted these things then. And it then came to me very forcefully that this is how wrecks should be excavated.
I would encourage you to go and listen to that full interview, and I'll show you how shortly.
Where did you look?
So from 2017 to 2018, a pilot project called Writing Honour, the Levant and the History of Archaeological Ideas about Seascapes was undertaken by Dr. Jessie Ransley and Dr. Crystal Safadi. And the project traced Honour's work on submerged sites off the coast of the Levant and its influence on the development of maritime archaeological ideas about seascapes. It also included a series of oral history interviews. There's a really useful GIS story map which has been developed, and there's a QR code there if you want to have a look at it and learn more about Honor Frost and the projects that she worked on. So through that Soundings project, here's some of the people interviewed as part of that. And the Writing Honour projects. And so, as I said, many of these people touched on the development of the discipline. So you can see a real sort of global spread of people there from lots of different backgrounds that she worked with during her career. So as a result, Listening to Our Past was established, and the aim of this project was to record interviews with individuals who've contributed to the field of maritime archaeology, with the aim of building a historically informed understanding of the development of the discipline. So looking at how and why maritime archaeology is the way it is today. We're aware maritime archaeology has deep roots, but the project has been focusing really on that period of rapid transformation. So from the 50s to the 80s, because we've still got the opportunity to capture that information from some of the individuals who were involved. Previous narratives on the development of the discipline have often focused on the likes of George Bass, and this project has shown that whilst their contributions are undoubted, it was a much more complex story involving a range of people, particularly from non-academic or non-archaeological backgrounds. So we developed a strategy for collecting oral histories. We still do make the initial contact with an individual based on our existing knowledge and from suggestions by other people. We develop a short biography about each person, which helps us to steer the interview and the questions. The interviews take place either in person or remotely. We do them online. There's, of course, lots of paperwork and permission forms. It's just a necessary part to ensure that right from the start, people have information about the purpose and nature of the project. We create transcripts for every interview. They also provide some flexibility because they allow additional information to be added, or after reading their interviews, sometimes people like to redact certain sections of them. So preparation is really important because we're preserving someone's story about their career or part of their life story. So interviewees need to have confidence that the recording will be used within a legal and ethical framework. So we're clear about how the interviews are archived and so on. So this is a sort of process really of that. And then I'll show you the end products shortly. Now, the biography that we create for each person, when I know I'm going to do an interview, I try and do a bit of background research to plan the interview strategy. But essentially, we have sort of three main strands, really. We have a chronological review of somebody's career or their involvement in maritime archaeology. Then we ask more reflective questions, such as sort of most fulfilling projects. And finally, we ask more sort of general discipline related questions. But overall, we try not to structure the interviews too much. We like to let them flow and allow them to be relatively informal. Here's my colleague on the left, Sabrina Marlier. She was interviewing Eric Reith in France. He discussed many projects that he'd worked on, such as the Madrag de Gien site and working with the likes of Patrice Pommet. I was fortunate to interview Glavkos Kariolu whilst I was in Cyprus. His father discovered the Kyrenia shipwreck in 1965, and Glavkos actually started diving on the site whilst he was still at school. I think he was about 11 years old or something, and it was like a 35-metre site, and he was telling me, and he's been involved ever since. Gathering photographs from individuals has also been a really interesting part of the project. Here's just a few. These are now on the portal, which I'll show you. I think we've got almost 300 photos now from individuals who've been involved. Some of you are here today, so thank you very much. I'm going to play a clip now from a few of the individuals. I don't want to embarrass you, Jane. I did warn Jane. I've used a clip from one of her interviews as well, but I just really like how she talks about her first dive on the Mary Rose. So I've got a clip from Veronica Robbins. She was the receiver of wreck in the 1990s. So she would have been involved with Ron, and then Jane, and then also Peter Marsden. So here's just a taste of some of the interviews, hopefully.
Somehow I had to make it work. And it seems to me that if we were going to be looking seriously at our heritage, and we are a maritime nation, aren't we? Historically, we are, but with that comes the smugglers. That's life as well. But we have a lot to be proud of and a lot to protect. And the protection of wrecks Act was there for nothing. It was there because it was recognised in 1973 that there were wrecks that needed to be protected. But there's also material out there that perhaps wasn't of intrinsic value, but it's important. And I started to become fascinated by it. And I realised I was custodian. I felt I was custodian of maritime heritage almost, because I sat there and to get this whole thing to work. And then I was diving wrecks. And then came Mary Rose. And
So that was your first maritime?
That was my first maritime, and I can still today remember that first dive, because when you leapt off the platform, went down the shot line, right by the shot line there was one of the guns, and it was barrel into mud, so classical lead sticking out, and people obviously touched it as they went past. So it was bronze gun, so it glowed. So it wasn't very good for this, but it was this glowing gun, and everybody's touching it as they went past. And I can still remember the first time I touched it, and then went off to have a look at the cook's tour and around the wreck. And as I passed it and left the shop, I absolutely knew things changed, and it was never quite going to be the same again.
I was age 14 in 1954. I visited an excavation in London of the Temple of Mithras, and my grandfather, who's a police player, he managed to get permission to dig on the building site near the temple. I found all sorts of Roman remains and got hooked on archaeology in London. And then in 1959, I was visiting Guy's Hospital, where they were building a new wing for the new Guy's house. And there in the side of the a huge hole was part of a Roman boat. And I had no idea what to do about it or who to get in touch with or anything. So I recorded what I could see. And I then undertook in 1959, that's in 1958. I've got the date of the actual discovery of where the boat, 8th of March 1958. So that's when I got involved in maritime archaeology, though I didn't know it at the time. The next year I did a small excavation and found one boat. So 2nd century Newcastle houseboat. And I applied for it to be scheduled as a historic monument. And I was told that no, by the government department dealing with scheduling of monuments at the time, that because the boat was intended to move, it had no legal status, it couldn't be protected under the scheduling law. Well, this was all wrong because it's huge. And did it mean that it effectively could not be protected as a historic ship, for example?
So just a taste really of some of the interviews there. This is all the people that we've interviewed so far. You may notice some were also interviewed for the previous project. So as that one, as I said, focused more on their work with Honor Frost, these interviews focus more on their contributions to the field. We've been able to undertake interviews in other languages, including Spanish, French, German, Chinese, Greek, and Italian, many of which were also translated to English. What's been really interesting through this project is beginning to see how and why things have developed, particularly in relation to policy and protection. In many countries, we see the field develop as a reaction to the growth of treasure hunting once scuba became more widely available. In others, it evolved out of particular key finds, which sparked great interest from local communities. The interviews have demonstrated how the discipline has also developed over different time periods, in some countries with pioneering work happening as early as the 50s and 60s, whereas in others, we see the development happening a lot later, such as in the 90s. And key individuals, often not archaeologists, played pivotal roles in the pioneering use of particular methodologies, education, policy, and practice. So what this project has shown is that maritime archaeology is a relatively young discipline with a complex history, and that fairly singular narratives you find published are not telling the whole picture, and they're not recognising the huge variety of people involved. So to manage the audio, the transcripts, the photographs, and all the other data collected, my colleagues, Iro and Jasmine, and with the help of Brandon as well, built a database and a portal. So alongside our interviews, we've also included the historic interviews from soundings and other interviews like that Radio 4 interview with Honor Frost in 1993. I also have an interview from 2014 that the Foundation had with George Bass. So I'm not so technical, but this slide apparently simplifies the data store model that we used. The structure of the database was designed with the portal and the final users in mind, also using a series of tags. So they're controlled lists, which allows the data to be searchable in the front-end portal, which I'll show you. So we hope we can continue to add more to this. The Institute of Nautical Archaeology are planning to interview some of their founding members, so I'm hoping to add those or link to those and make this a bit of a repository for oral histories in maritime archaeology. So I keep talking about it. Here's the portal, which only came out a few weeks ago. It's at historyofmaritimearchaeology.org, and I've got a QR code in a minute. So when you go into the portal, let's start moving in a sec. You have one of these tall things that tells you what to click on. And so you can see there's lots of different ways to explore. It shows you where the interviewee information is going to come up. And then you can go to view all. So you can see we've got 92 interviews in there at the moment. So you can they're just listed alphabetically. You can scroll through those. You can filter them by nationality, length, language, or whatever. You can also explore the interviews by location. So we have a list of all the countries that the interviewees have worked in. So that's in our tags. So for example, if you click on France, all the people who've mentioned working on projects in there will come up, and you can scroll through those. You can explore by language as well. And you can go to the gallery, which I mentioned earlier, that has all the photographs from the people that we've interviewed. So you can scroll through those. If you click on one of the photographs, can't remember why I chose that one, that was Eric Rees. You can also click on the person's name and it takes you to their entry where you have a synopsis of their interview and how long it was and the language and so on. So we have a summary, try to put those in English and French in this case. These are those tags I mentioned, so institutions, places, countries, sites and so on worked in. Then you've got the interview itself, so you can play the audio, and then we've got a PDF of the transcript which you can download. So they can be quite long documents. Some of the interviews are sort of 3-4 hours long. And then all the photographs that person has sent us as well is in there. So that comes up on there. You can also search in this bar if you were looking for a particular person, site, project. So I just typed in Barry Cunliffe, and then again, you can see their interview details. Underneath the interview, if there are links to other interview projects that they've been involved in that I've been able to find, they're in there as well, embedded. So Barry Cunliffe did some interviews as part of the archaeology show. It was a podcast on YouTube, so you can listen to those as well as the one that we did with him. And then I think the final thing to show you is the resources page, which I'm always working on, but it links to the Maritime Archaeological Archives, which are held at Special Collections at University of Southampton, including the Archive of Honor Frost, other relevant oral history projects or YouTube videos, so the NAS, the IGNA, both key institutions for the development of the discipline. So we link to their YouTube videos, the Diving into the Past series, Mariner's Mirror podcast, Dive and Dig. This is a timeline which I can't take credit for. This is the University of Southampton's timeline, which we've embedded on the website. And you can scroll through this to explore more about the history of maritime archaeology. So sort of key moments in time. I think if you go through it, it talks, the invention of the aqualung in there, like Cape Gelidonia that I mentioned earlier is in there. Joan de Platte Taylor is mentioned, Jacques Cousteau. And so on. So that's quite a nice resource that the university has put together, which we've put on the resources page. And then there's the main info page, which tells you about the Listening to Our Past project and how it came about. And we've also got a FAQ section there. For example, if you want to also get involved, it'll tell you about how you could get in touch. And then just to thank all the people that have helped put that all together. So I think that's the whistle stop tour on the portal done. Is anything else? Don't think so. That's the QR code to take you to the portal. I think it works on mobile phones and tablets now. I think Jasmine was just tweaking some things because there's so many different devices that you want to make sure it works across as well. So, but hopefully you should be able to get the gist of it. And what I hope this has also demonstrated is that the portal has the potential to be a powerful research tool. You could explore multiple voices, uncover overlooked voices, understand change, and you can combine data, all of which can help us to better understand and reflect on the development of maritime archaeology. I want to share with you some of the stories we had the privilege to hear. So back in 2023, myself and Julie interviewed Valerie Fennick. As I'm sure most of you know, particularly because of her affiliation with the Nautical Archaeology Society, Valerie was an influential archaeologist, well known for her contributions to maritime archaeology, particularly through her work on the Sutton Hoo ship, the Dover Bronze Age boat, and the Gravely boat. Valerie told us about her academic background, her professional career, and her involvement in the development of policy and practice. Alongside the likes of David Blackman, she was actively involved in lobbying for the Protection of Wrecks Act in 1973. And with the likes of Bob York and Alex Blinder, she was instrumental in founding the NAS, as well as serving in editorial roles for the IGNA, later co-founding the Hampshire and White Trust and serving as vice president for the CBA, among many other achievements. She described entering maritime archaeology in its formative years when little formal structure or training existed. She recounts learning through improvisation. Valerie played a quiet but pivotal role in formalising training and ethical standards for maritime archaeologists, especially through her work with the NAS. She reflected on the need to balance accessibility for avocational divers with professional rigour. Through her involvement with the IGNA and later advisory work, Valerie influenced how maritime archaeology positioned itself as a discipline. And here are some of the quotes from her. I'm just trying to get hold of some more photographs actually of Valerie, so I need to contact her family as well, because I know there will be some more of her. Just to demonstrate the global nature of the project, I also wanted to talk a bit about Jeremy Green. Jeremy was instrumental in founding maritime archaeology as a discipline in Australia. Before that, he worked on projects around the Mediterranean and the UK, including Yasiada with George Bass and the Kyrenia with Michael Katsev. He worked with Peter Marsden on the Amsterdam wreck, and then he joined the Western Australian Museum in the early 1970s. He led excavations on major shipwrecks such as the Batavia and Virgil Drac, which set new global standards for underwater excavations and conservation. So Jeremy was a pioneer in applying emerging technologies to underwater archaeology, developing digital photogrammetry, acoustic positioning tools, underwater recording methods, all long before they became standard practice. His influence extended far beyond Australia. He played a leading role in ICOOCH and contributed to the drafting and advocacy of the 2001 UNESCO Convention. So there's some of the quotes as well from his interview, which is available on the portal. And finally, I just wanted to talk about Walter Zakachuk, who was central to establishing underwater archaeology as a recognised professional discipline in Canada. I don't feel like he's quite so well known, but he first discovered diving as a child. Back in 1951, he built a hand-operated pump with his father, and he went on to work internationally as a diver, joining Parks Canada in the 1970s. So he helped to build one of the world's first government-supported maritime archaeology programs. Walter helped pioneer standards for underwater recording, conservation and diver safety within federal frameworks. His recollections emphasised the experimental spirit of early fieldwork, when custom-built tools were often the only option. Like Jeremy, he worked closely with UNESCO and international partners, helping to shape global policy on underwater heritage. And he stressed that the success of maritime archaeology depends on collaboration between governments, academia, and the diving community. So the listening to our past interviews with Valerie, Jeremy, and Walter really reveal how oral history captures that human dimension of maritime archaeology. So those decisions, collaborations, and those moments of innovation that shaped a global discipline. Their testimonies go beyond excavation reports and policy documents, and they give voice to the lived experience behind professional practice. Valerie's recollections of the early days of the NAS and her role in developing heritage policy demonstrate how professional structures and ethical frameworks evolve through personal commitment and persuasion. From the other side of the world, Jeremy reflects on the creation of Australia's Maritime Archaeology Programme and the inventive use of technology to record and conserve underwater sites where no formal tools yet existed. So his testimony shows the discipline's experimental spirit and its global exchange of knowledge. Meanwhile, Walter's experiences in Canada capture the institutionalisation of maritime archaeology within government frameworks, setting in international standards, and all within linking those national programmes to UNESCO's global policy efforts. So together, these voices show that maritime archaeology has always been a dialogue between nations, between professionals and volunteers, and between the past and those who choose to preserve it. Oral histories preserve this dialogue, capturing insights, humour, and reflections that are absent from the written record. They allow us not only to document what was done, but to understand why and how it was done, offering a richer, more connected history of a discipline still defining itself through the people who built it. So I hope I've demonstrated the value of listening to a past, bringing those stories to life and capturing that information before it's lost. In the next phase, I'm just waiting to hear back about future funding. I'm hoping to continue the interviews, further build a network of partners for this global presentation and share the portal. I'm hoping to undertake some in-memory interviews as well and explore how we can incorporate archives as well within that, or some digital stories. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Thank you for this presentation. Interesting how oral history can bring heritage to life. I have some questions, but I will start with audience. Any question? Yes, ma'am.
Is there anybody who you really wish you could have done, but it was too late?
Yes, there's quite a lot of people on that list, which is why I've built this in-memory interviews. I would love to speak to Joan de Platt Taylor. Her name comes up all the time as she was a real sort of facilitator, putting people in touch with the right people and enabling lots of projects. So I would have loved to talk to her. Sean McGrail is one. He was actually interviewed as part of our Soundings project. We haven't been able to get permission from his family to share the transcript yet. We're just working on that. But I'd quite like to do some in-memory interviews for him as well. They're the names that come to mind first, I think.
So that is other people's memories of work.
Yeah, with them. So like the Soundings project with Honor, it'll just be asking people, what was this person, what are your memories or anecdotes of working with? There's some amazing ones on Soundings of people working with Honor Frost. I mean, some got redacted later on, unfortunately. One day we might be able to share them all, but there is some brilliant stories. And I think the humour as well. I mean, we spoke to Colin and Paula Martin, and she had some great stories. So I don't know, there's loads. I've got lots of stories and lots of people, but do have a look at the portal as well.
Other questions? While gathering your thoughts, I'll ask my first question. So, how do you see that? You said it came recently, but how do you see this is used by younger generation? What your expectation or any experience you have had so far?
Yeah, I haven't had a huge amount of experience yet with the generation. I hope it will inspire people. I think we need to probably use it more to create some stories, because like I said, some of the interviews are really long. And also, some of those people we spoke to have got their own personal archives, which I want to then digitize elements of those to go alongside that snippet of oral history to create some engaging stories. Because I think if I gave a 60-page transcript to somebody, which I think I need to change the background color of the paper from white after what Dave said. But we've got a lot of long amounts of text and long audio. But I think we need to do some work to pull out some of the more engaging, snappier stories to get younger people.
Other question? Yes, Mark?
Do you think in 30 years' time, people of our generation will be having to be interviewed?
I was going to email you, Mark.
You just mentioned that, man.
Yeah, I'm just looking around this room thinking, who do I need to get in touch with next? Yeah, no, it's an evolving project, isn't it? I don't know what the sort of, I don't know if you should be worried when you get it. I have, really, because new things are coming out. And like I said, even now with, us keeping more records and digital world and everything, those stories, like Ron, I mean, I've interviewed Ron, which is just a brilliant interview, thank you, Ron, and his stories as well, that aren't necessarily written down in the publication of that project or on the website, but those feelings, those hairy cuddles, all of those things that you get out of an interview. So I think that will always be required.
Yes.
As a digital art, what are you doing to future-proof it?
It's a good question. Yeah, I'm passing responsibility on to the special collections at the University of Southampton. So Honor Frost's archive is held there, along with Lucian Bash, Nick Fleming, Sean McGrail, Peter Marsden, soon to be David Blackman's archive. They're all there. They're managed and curated by them. All of these interviews are going there, so they'll get the audio file and the transcript and all the permission forms, and then it's up to them. It's their responsibility then to curate those for future proof, especially the digital.
Technology changes, they will be transferred to the next generation.
Yeah, kind of like the Archaeology Data Service. I mean, that's another option. If the project keeps going and they can't continue, then we'll be depositing everything with the ADS as well.
Great. Okay, thank you very much, Lauren, for your presentation. Thank you.